Okay, hey everybody. Hopefully you can see me, hear me okay. Please let me know in the chat and we'll see if that pops up. I wanted to just do a bit of a stream today in response to what happened on Leppo's channel. Vaporbat Records was on Teenage FBI Live with a nearly 4 hour long stream interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Michael Aquino. And it was an excellent interview. Michael Aquino is the founder of the Temple of Set, and he is a former member of the Council of Nine of the Church of Satan. So he was kind of like the number two to Anton LaVey, and then he left the Church of Satan to create his own group called the Temple of Set. He's also a military colonel, deeply involved in psychological operations for his whole 40-year career, and highly trained and specialised in it. He did black magic rituals in a Nazi castle, so that's some of the stuff that we're going to get into today. But this episode was basically a PsyopFest, and it featured only three people. They were given the appearance of being random callers, but in fact they I think were quite carefully chosen. And in the chat for the episode, there are a number of people that the chat wanted to call in to ask questions, and they weren't really having any of that. There were no questions taken from the chat, but it was Thomas Schoenberger, the All-Seeing You, and Frank Bacon. So these guys, together with Leppo and Michael Aquino, probably the highest level Satanist that we know of that's ever served in the US military. Certainly could be more high-level ones in the British military. There's a guy called J.C. Fuller, who was a general, a brigadier general, I think, that was a friend and disciple of Aleister Crowley. And Michael Aquino himself, following in Crowley's footsteps, he believes he did a ritual on the beach in Santa Barbara channeling Aiwas, which was the same spirit that spoke to Aleister Crowley in the pyramids, and he gave him this whole new religion called the Temple of Set. So some similarities in this religion with the Mormon religion, how the angel Moroni came from the sky and gave Joseph Smith these golden tablets with the whole new religion in it. And maybe every great religion has to start with a similar kind of myth to that. But let me just pause for a second and make sure everything's coming through all right on the chat here. Okay, looks like it's coming through loud and clear for everybody. So thanks very much for tuning tuning in. I'll continue with my presentation. So unfortunately today my time is pretty limited. I'm going to a conference this week, which is pretty funny because DeFango's just been to a conference this week. I think Dave Acton has just got back from a conference. Seems like there's a lot of conferences going on at this time of year. And anyway, I've got to get out of here today, but I wanted to delve into who Michael Aquino is a bit. And it's an interesting topic to talk about because Thomas Schoenberger was the first caller in, and I thought he asked some pretty interesting questions. He asked about the pyramids of Egypt being used as musical instruments. And since Aquino was so deeply into Egyptology, maybe he knows something about that. So I thought that was a pretty good question. Unfortunately, Aquino didn't really know anything about that, but he said that he wouldn't doubt that stuff like that would be a factor in the design. But basically, this was a PsyopFest fest that all of these people calling in were reveling in the idea of psychological operations. And I don't know, maybe that is just the world that we live in now, that just like Snowden came out and said, well, guess what? The NSA is spying on you. It's reading all your emails. It's listening to all your phone calls. Every private message you think you send, they read it and collect it and store it forever. They have AIs that, track all of this data, run simulations on you, and can basically read your thoughts and predict your behavior. Hey, but it's no big deal. Everyone go about your life, just as you were yesterday. And that's pretty much what happened. Everybody did go about their lives. And so maybe this is sort of what we've reached in humanity and civilization with this election coming up, as these LARPers and PsyOPers are going to just, come clean, like DeFango did with his subpoena stream. I heard him saying today he got in trouble with Ed Batowski for sharing so much information, including passwords, and he didn't seem too concerned about it. But it's coming out that there are organizations behind these people who just appear to be LARPers that you're interacting with on social media. In the stream, Frank Bacon couldn't wait to tell Aquino that he had been a member of a secret society in Denver, Colorado, which is where the NORAD Mount Cheyenne missile systems are. So Michael Aquino was actually in space intelligence. He would have been close to Denver, Colorado, in that part of his career. Colorado Springs, I think, is the Mount Cheyenne. And he said that he was part of the Golden Dawn for at least 10 years, and he knew Boyd Rice. Now, if you followed my investigation into Tracy Twyman's mysterious and sudden death, you'll know that she actually also knew Boyd Rice. Boyd Rice was one of the co-founders and key members of the Church of Satan and a major figure in the black magic occult world. So this guy Bacon that attacks me constantly on Steemit and anywhere else that he gets given a platform, because he doesn't like what Queen Tut said about him in Crypto Beast 16. Everybody should go check that out. He is literally a dark occultist. The other guy that's part of Leppo's crew, Jay Anon, his Instagram is full of pictures of Baphomet and Freemasons and stuff like that, pentagrams. And he's a LARPer on the internet that's making memes and getting involved with these kind of political operations, the gay ops on people, the doxing. I'm not saying that Jayanon does doxing, but what I'm saying is that there are these people involved in secret societies who know each other and seem to collaborate with each other, kind of in a way that you would say is like a gang, and they do kind of pick targets and attack all of those targets together at the same time, like a gang would do. So this is what's known as gang stalking. And if there's anyone on the internet who has been accused of gang stalking the most, and also would claim to be a victim of the most, it's probably Thomas Schoenberger, who called into this show but didn't talk about that with Dr. Aquino, which is unfortunate because Dr. Aquino is actually in the same position, and the similarities between him and Thomas are really quite remarkable, that I think I would describe both of those men as black magicians. They would probably call themselves that as well. And they're both interested in these psyops and psychological operations. And Aquino talks about psyops being lesser black magic. Propaganda is lesser black magic. New t-shirt coming from truthclothing.io, I hear, propaganda. But this new type of psyop and all this LARPing where people appear to be a truther, but in fact they're not crowdsourcing truth. They're really just trying to build clicks, views, audiences, get people to, subscribe to their Patreon, give them donations, fund their lifestyle, not so much out of entertainment, but out of attacking others. And when you're the victim of that, it seems that these people just have a personal grudge against you. But now that these documents are being driven out by some of these lawsuits, we're seeing that actually some of these people are working in teams. They're working in organizations such as this Shadowbox organization, or such as Black Cube, or the Integrity Initiative, or Cambridge Analytica. These types of groups are precisely targeting people using all of the available social media data, which is a lot, right? I mean, Cambridge Analytica supposedly got the social graph off Facebook in 2012 of everyone in the Democratic Party. Now, that's the time when DeFango was involved with the IT for the Democrats, supposedly reporting to the person who was directly responsible for giving Cambridge Analytica that technology. Ask him about it. I'm going by what he said about it. But yeah, and then you have this link with Trevor Fitzgibbon, with WikiLeaks, with Podesta's Center for American Progress. Not only were these people partners with Thomas Schoenberger, but Trevor and DeFango were partners again in their own thing called Silent Partner IO, that they were doing within Shadowbox. And Thomas and the other partner, Fox, they didn't like that. So they all sort of parted their ways. And when that happens, everyone learned the name Thomas Schoenberger from DeFango. And before that, people hadn't heard of him. And people say to me, well, Thomas, don't you understand he has a criminal record? And you'd be surprised how many of these characters in this YouTube psychological drama have criminal records. And then they say, well, but don't you know that there was this lawsuit, he was accused of stalking, and there was this lawsuit. This is one that hit on Twitter recently, and you go and look at it, and it says case dismissed. It didn't go into a lawsuit. It was all, someone made a claim, said that he'd done some stuff, and then the case was dismissed. So, I mean, maybe he was guilty of that. How would I know? How would anyone know if there's not a lawsuit? But it's incredible how people basically dredge up dirt on people and then publish it, dox them with it, and then also then make videos and streams attacking them with whatever dirt they can do. I mean, look at, if you go have a look on my Twitter history of discussing with Lestat, he basically set up this trap to get me to talk about adrenochrome, and then he attacked me with it, saying, ha ha ha, Steve Outram believes in adrenochrome. Look at this fool. I mean, this is a true story, that people actually spend their time doing this stuff. And this is the type of thing that Aquino is the absolute master of. All of this LARPing, this mind war, this lesser black magic and propaganda, and smoothly, seductively leading people towards information that's almost right, but not quite right. That is the nature of this. This is like the left-hand path. Go look on Lestat's channel. He made a video called that, the left-hand path versus the right-hand path. And righteousness, right? This is what Jesus Christ and God and the Christian religion is about. This is actually also what Judaism is about, as far as I know, and even the Muslim faith. Righteousness, doing the right thing, doing something that is good and proper, and staying away from wickedness and evil and sin. And the alternative side of that, evil, you don't have to believe in the devil or Set or ancient Egyptian gods or anything. You could be an atheist. You could be Ayn Rand objectivist, and you have the same ideologies as the Satanists. The Satanists are all about self is God. And I believe religion is a personal thing. It's not something I want to get into today, but I think that all of us have a relationship with God within ourselves. And that's, to me, is what the Christian faith is all about, is making that connection with God in your relationship with yourself. It's not about what comes out of a church or who you give money to, but just as the same way that there are churches on the Christian side, on the dark side, there are churches as well, and the Church of Satan is one specific one. Aquino was heavily involved in that. The Temple of Set is another specific one. And, he might say at first glance or try to create the impression that he and his wife are just into animal welfare and it's all very positive what they're doing. I mean, the guy is a great philosopher and Mind War is a great philosophy and something that I think will be discussed in many generations to come in the future. But if you watch this Leppo interview, and I'm not going to play any of it, but if you see it, uh, he's basically, says that this whole technology, that everything that he learned from, he's joined the Esalen Institute when he was 16 and he was exposed to what they had gleaned in their research collaborations, spying if you like, sending people to form relationships with Russian scientists and academics and getting the knowledge of the Russians. So this is the true Russiagate here, people, is that Mind War, the idea, if you read the original Mind War paper that Aquino wrote with Paul Vallely, who's the Fox News military analyst, they're basically outlining the idea for CNN and Fox News to have journalist units embedded with military units reporting from the front lines so they can shape the propaganda to be whatever they want, because no one's going to go to the war zone to actually check their story out. And if you look at since 1980 when that paper was written, that's 40 years, and that's basically been the military doctrine. This is all part of the revolution in military affairs, which, I'd recommend go check out Matthew North's work on that. But let me just show you, or did we just finish that point about, so the similarities between Thomas and Aquino is that there's a whole bunch of people that absolutely demonize both of these people, that when they hear their names, they're like convinced that these are the embodiment of evil. And if in fact those two men are black magicians, then this would be exactly what they wanted. This would be the absolute desired consequence. Get people quaking in fear. But if you have a look at Thomas's work through Sophia Music, I don't really see that that's what he's trying to achieve. And if you have a look at Aquino's work since he retired from the military and in his books, I don't really think that's what he's trying to achieve either. So I try to take both of them as, well, look, they're men that may have different philosophies, ideologies, ways of doing things from me, but what do they have to offer me if I'm going to give 4 hours of my attention to watching an interview? I'm interested in hear their thoughts and different perspectives and consider them and see if I agree with them or not. And, there's many areas where I could agree with both of these men, but does that mean that I then am a follower of them? Am I working for them? Am I part of their side? Absolutely not. I could be on a different side from someone, but still come to agreement with them. And that's what the entire world is all about. And if we lose that, they win, right? So I find it very striking that if I say anything in defense of Aquino, you watch what will happen. I will be branded as an Aquino apologist, but I don't know that I am. I'm not prepared to say 100% that guy is not guilty of some bad stuff. But I am prepared to say that I don't think he's guilty of everything that he's accused of at all. At all. And I would say the same thing about Thomas Schoenberger. So I think both of those people should be given their chance to speak for themselves. And thank you, Leppo, for giving a platform to, not only to Michael Aquino, but to Thomas as well, and to anybody else, I guess, that wants to get involved and speak their piece about this. If they don't want to do a live stream themselves, they can come on Leppo's channel. But I didn't want to do that, and you can go check my Twitter. I'm on the record saying that, I want nothing to do with Frank Bacon or Michael Aquino or Jayanon. I mean, these people are Satanists. They make pentagrams and worship freaking Baphomet and stuff like that. So let me take a pause for a second and show you a clip, and please let me know in the chat if the clip is actually coming through all right. Okay, so getting some word that there's no sound on the clip there. Let me see what I can do. How about now? Okay, let's try again with the sound. Otherwise, I just guess I won't play clips. Okay, I'll just move on. Fuck, sorry about that. Um, so all right, so let's get into some of this stuff, and I what you're looking at on the screen there is my web brain, which is my research. I've got nearly 10,000 links to external web pages, about 3,000 file attachments, and about, I don't know, just under 20,000 different thoughts that I have collected information about. And so some of these things I have studied very, very deeply, and some of them I haven't studied that deeply. I did research for about 4 years full time, thinking I was going to write a book, and then realized with a lot of this stuff where there's actually like video, sound, images of it available, using this multimedia internet format, really offers a lot more, and people who want to delve in deeper can, dig into the links and read some more into this. And so Aquino is come up as one of the main characters in the book. And if you look at my series that I did with Jan Irvin, Silicon Valley's Secret Weapon, The Shadow History of Burners, we went, episode 2, we went right into PSYOPs and the Presidio, and speaking not so much about Aquino, but speaking morely about Jim Channon, the men who stare at goats, Project Stargate, Project Jedi, Project Grill Flame, these stuff where people like this is absolute for real. At the Presidio, which is the area of green pictured on the screen there in the background, and other locations around the world, secret military projects were doing remote viewing, trying to see inside submarines and underground bases and things like that. And if you watch The Outer Light, that's a channel I really recommend, Esoteric Ed, he was saying how the US military is training the majority of their forces to be able to fight in the 10,000 subterranean cities that they've identified around the world. So what on earth is going on inside the earth, right? That's something different. But underneath this Presidio is all these bunkers and tunnels, and it's covered with satanic stuff. It's got pentagrams and everything in it. And so people are obviously doing satanic rituals in these Presidio bunkers. And in fact, child molesters have been caught doing rituals in these bunkers. And there was an enormous scandal in the 1980s at the Presidio, a childhood ritual abuse scandal. And I don't know if we're going to have time to get right into that today, but just to put some context into it, Aquino was accused of that. And at first, I believed for sure he must have done it. If you read the stuff that's about him on the internet, you'll be convinced for sure he must have done it. But I keep an open mind, and I do my own research, and I look into things. And the more I looked into it, like I read his book, which is called Extreme Prejudice, and his own writings. And, you know, he does make a pretty good case for almost all of the evidence. But I have to say, it's almost all, it's not quite all. And there are a couple of things that definitely still give me some concern. But I don't think today's going to be a big investigation into that side of it. But I do, you know, want to kind of highlight some of the things this guy did. So let's start with that DOD Directive 1300.17, the accommodation of religious practices within the military services. So the date on this is February the 3rd, 1988. Okay, you guys are seeing that on the screen now? So this was a big thing that's going on in the 80s, and you hear this talk of the satanic panic. You look at the creation of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation that basically, up until about the mid-70s, the MK Ultra project had 149 different sub-projects working with all kinds of universities, hospitals, mental hospitals, and all kinds of drugs, at least 15 different kinds of hallucinogenic drugs, doing experiments on people and, you know, basically trying to mind control them, trying to hypnotize them. If you go to my channel, Crypto Beast on Vimeo, and just type in Aquino, you'll see the 4 clips that I was going to play and check them out for yourself. But yeah, he's actually there talking about hypnosis and mind control being part of MK Ultra. He says MK Ultra was a load of bullshit. They couldn't make any mind control assassins, but also it was all about hypnosis, and that's what stage magicians do as well. So this, you know, when you watch this interview with him, you have to bear in mind that this is someone who is an absolute master of black propaganda and hypnosis, and just the way that he speaks, his pattern of speech, the topics he talks about, the way he moves and shifts conversations around. You know, this is something that I study in general in people, and I'm fascinated to learn it. You know, why would I study something like that? Well, I'm a business guy, I'm a sales guy, and anything that I can learn to help me get a sale, I've always wanted to learn that since I was a little kid. And to me, a lot of how you get a sale comes from authenticity, from really believing in the product yourself, and have something that you're enthusiastic about. And that comes across to people. People feel that that's true. And that's what Aquino says as well, if you read his book. His book, Mind War, is an incredible book. And so I respect him in his thinking and his contribution to the military science, and how many lives potentially have been saved because we're going to have these propaganda and LARP-based and PSYOP-based battles, you know, the war on for your mind that Alex Jones talks about, instead of actually civil war in the streets. And you look at some of these LARPs running hot that have happened in the US recently, also in my country, New Zealand. You know, we've had a big massacre this year as well. And the guy in the Christchurch massacre, he had these logos all over his stuff, Knights of the Black Sun. And this is what Michael Aquino was doing in Wewelsburg Castle in Heinrich Himmler's Nazi magical chamber. He's doing rituals for the Knights of the Black Sun. So, this is not someone that I support or endorse in any way. Like, this is against my religion. However, I can have respect for him, and I don't automatically class him as guilty. And something that's very important to remember is there's a principle in our society of innocent until proven guilty. And I know that that's hard to do, but in the case of the allegations against Aquino, which were very, very extreme and severe, he was deeply investigated. And he went on to hold his security clearances and even get promoted and work to the most sensitive areas of intelligence after that happened. If there was any truth to the allegations, wouldn't they have used that to throw him out of the military? Because he had right up to the top level of the Pentagon, and Jesse Helms, this sort of Christian right, they had singled him out to be, the symbol of Satanism in America that they had to kind of, attack and get out of the military. And so this document that's on the screen here is from this time when the Satanic Panic is going on, a combination of religious practices within the military services. And they're basically getting the military to say that, freedom of religion is part of the military, and including observing holy days. And so why should that not apply to the Satanists and the Setians as well? It's all so they should be able to worship their religion, have their pentagrams on their gravestones, and have a priest deliver the satanic rites to them if they die. And so one of the consequences of this is that if you're a Christian priest in the military, you get forced to learn these satanic rites so that you can administer them to the satanic members of the armed forces, of which it turns out there are many. And from the very beginning of the Church of Satan, it's included members of the old armed forces and seems to even have been targeted at them. So the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's house, was on California Street, which I think you can see my mouse, sort of around here. This is Golden Gate Park, the strip of land in the middle here. So this whole block of land used to be the Presidio, and then this development here is on Presidio land, but now has become a residential area. And then this main area here is the Presidio military base, which it was a Spanish base before California was a state. Since 1776, it's been a military base. And before San Francisco was a city, it was this military base of the Presidio. So this was America's oldest running military base. And then in the wake of this scandal, around about the mid-90s, the base had to close. Let me just check the chat again. Hey, Thomas. I see Thomas is tuned in. Hey, Joe. Hey, Thomas, you can have a wrench. That will set people's heads spinning, I'm sure. So where was I? I was talking about the Presidio military base. So it's right here in the middle of San Francisco, right? Next to it is Broadway and Baker Street, like that famous song, Winding Your Way Down on Baker Street. That goes right down basically the edge of the Presidio military base. And a lot of this stuff, if you go see my Crypto Beast 19, Crypto Beast 20 about the Grateful Dead, I'm going into a lot of, how the counterculture was basically formed out of this area and out of particularly Stanford and the Stanford Research Institute. And that they were basically looking for a way to get the tech industry in one place where they didn't really want to leave, and where they were allowed to be, creative and explore different kind of intellectual areas, because they could be easily controlled through the distribution of things like LSD through the Grateful Dead. And LSD itself being a suggestogen, I've had a falling out with Jan Irvin, but I do still, endorse a lot of the research that he did several years ago, and talking about entheogens, what's in a name. And, he coined this phrase suggestogen, saying that this is what they were really interested in is giving people stuff that would make them super suggestible and then programming them with electronic means, electronic music, electronic guitar, images flashed up before them, flashing lights, hypnosis. All of this stuff, how you hypnotize people. Stuart Brand was working on this with USCO, USCO, the US company in New York, before he even came out and joined the Merry Pranksters. So Aquino, in his interview with Leppo, he confirmed a lot of that research that I was talking about in Crypto Beast 20. It was asking, is the Grateful Dead an MK Ultra operation? And in fact, he said that he was best friends with Paul Kantner from Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, and still very good friends with Grace Slick. So he was collaborating with them from way back in the 60s, and he was passing on to them this kind of Esalen knowledge that had been developed by the Russians, and no doubt had been, Russia had their own paperclip of Nazi scientists coming out of MK Ultra. Quite possibly Esalen became a convenient way for the West to launder its own Nazi MK Ultra research that was maybe coming out of places like Paraguay and other places of South America. Maybe they could launder that through Esalen and say, oh, this came from the Russians, and they get a couple of appearances by Gorbachev, and it seems like they're really tight with the Russians. Who knows? I've got no evidence to show that, but we do know that the Nazis were doing experiments in mind control, quite horrific experiments, and we know that the MK Ultra program included many of these same types of experiments, and many of the same doctors. You've also got the social engineers of the Frankfurt School who came over, many of them before World War II, to unleash on the world this current system of cultural Marxism. And the idea of the creeping in from religion of saying, well, we have to allow Satanism in the military. And fair enough, these are soldiers, we want them to be killers. And you can see coming out of the Vietnam War, the horrors of that particularly bloody fighting, or moving on to the world that we're in now of this drone fighting where people can be so remotely detached from the consequences of pulling that trigger. What's behind it? Well, this is this revolution in military affairs where they've been shifting the hearts and minds of the people, moving what they call that Overton window of what people are prepared to accept. And video games have been a massive part of that. And that's coming out of Stanford Research Institute, major defense contractor. 2/3 of their business was defense contracting in the 70s when Stuart Brand launched video games in Rolling Stone magazine, a thing called Space War. Now, you might have heard of Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program. That was developed at Bohemian Grove, and Bohemian Grove has many close connections to the Presidio. Now, the Presidio itself was taken over by George Lucas, and when George Lucas sold out to Disney, there's conflicting reports of if he kept his rights to the Presidio or not. The official story I saw said that he had sold them. The unofficial thing that I heard, for what that's worth, said that he's still in control of all of that. So I don't know if anyone in the audience has more information on that. Please leave it in the comments. But this area, the Presidio, this is George Lucas's center for operations, right? So he had Skywalker Ranch on his own ranch out in Marin, and then he brought it in here to the Presidio, to the Letterman Art Center. So the Letterman Hospital, if you listen to that other wacky nut job that attacks me and trolls me, Douglas Dietrich, he says a lot about the Letterman military hospital that was on the base there, and the MK Ultra experiments being done there, which, I don't know, perhaps that checks out. But they destroyed the hospital. They destroyed the daycare center after the abuse there. It burned into fire. One of the children's related rooms with all the records in it burned into fire shortly after these things came out. And Michael Aquino has an alibi for that fire. He was definitely somewhere else on the day of that fire, like the other side of the country. So I've delved into this guy enough to be able to verify a lot of that, and some of the things he's accused of, he can't have done. But he says that he was not in San Francisco on any of the dates that this abuse of these kids occurred. And I do have information that conflicts with that. But anyway, I'm moving all over the place a bit with this, but let's see if I can start with some of the negative side, because I'm sure that will appease all the people who have already made up their minds that they hate this guy. Uh, this this one, Alex Constantine, is great. And look, I've got to say, I'm a fan of Alex Constantine. I think that he does excellent work and excellent research. And I think that a lot of his reporting on Aquino is spot on. It's just he has studied the same set of facts and come to a different conclusion than me. And my conclusion is not that the guy is innocent, but it is that I'm not fully convinced yet that he's guilty. And since he's been accused of the most heinous crimes, just for the information I have, not being able to say he's guilty with all this information, if I was in the jury, I would have to let him off. But, it didn't go before a jury. It did get investigated. He kept his clearances. So, I think that in our society, we have to say that innocent until proven guilty, but innocent when you've been subject to a very, very deep investigation. It's got to be worth something. But this is going to be the other side of it. So here's a quote from Aquino. The uncanny attraction of the Third Reich Nazi Germany lies in the fact that it endorsed and practiced both dynamism and life worship without end, and to a world-shaking degree of success. So if you watch that documentary, which I recommend, it's really good, The Greatest Story Never Told, it's about 5 hours of how actually Hitler was a great leader and united the country and was trying to achieve good things and was trying to take on the banksters and everything like that, and free the people and bring about a better world. So I don't believe with that philosophy, but I can see that there is some truth in it. That for example, if you go to Germany and you drive on the autobahns, those roads are incredible, and that's because of Hitler that they have those incredible roads that you can drive really fast on. So everything in the world isn't black or white. That's if you believe in Jesus Christ, then you must only ever expose yourself to the ideas of Jesus. And if anyone is not a follower of Jesus, you can't have a conversation with them. You can't listen to what they have to say. You can't think about it, express an opinion. I don't believe in that, and I also, at the same time, I generally try to stay away from people that express these values of Satanism and narcissism and things like that. So, if you have a look at that Leppo interview, that's one thing that definitely stood out to me was people being very eager to be associated with it. Here we go. To hear High Priest Aquino tell it, his Temple of Set, a splinter group of the Church of Satan, it's no more sinister than the Order of Woodcraft Chivalry. Setianism is a legitimate and ethical religion incorporated since 1975, enjoying full-time state and federal recognition as a religious institution. And he was also the Grand Master of the Order of the Trapezoid, and that's a different organisation from the Temple of Set. As far as I can tell, that's yet another secret society. So all of these lodges, whether it's the OTO or the Solar Temple or the Temple of Set, or the Church of Satan, or the Freemasons, or the Shriners, they're all basically different branches, different DNA of the same thing. And that's why it's good to think of the secret society as a monolith, like Joe Atwill talks about. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to have a glass of water, and I'll go take a look at the chat. Okay, I'm back. Great to see everyone there in the chat. Thanks so much for tuning in. Unfortunately, I did say at the start I've got to go. I'm going to have to go in like 10 minutes. So I'm not getting anywhere near as into this as I could. But check out this Alex Constantine thing. He talks about Aquino in Vietnam, this thing called Operation Wandering Soul. And they had this blood-curdling tape with Vietnamese Buddhist burial customs. And they played this funeral music, and then they got into screaming, getting louder. Then, after an eternity, the screaming subsided into the moans of a dying soldier, his body abandoned by comrades. It was chilling, and then finally you hear him being dragged away screaming by the demons. So this is the sort of thing that this guy created as a military weapon, right? Weaponized psyops. They're using electronics and information and the way people think and hypnosis, the way they deliver words, trigger buttons and emotional reactions that they seek out of people. They're using all of that together. Then they're amplifying it. And in this case with helicopters with massive amounts of loudspeakers. But in social media, the way of amplification is not through the volume, it's through the frequency. So they amplify the messages on social media by networks, by having groups of people that are all delivering the same messages. And this is why you've got to do your own research. But, is this a good guy that's recording the voices of dead and dying soldiers and screams and playing it to millions of civilians as well as soldiers, children, women, whatever, in a war zone, blasting this through the jungles and people hiding in tunnels in Vietnam? Is that a good guy? Well, he's doing it in the service of his country. And that's one thing when you look at Aquino's military record. He's had an exemplary military record. I mean, his entire life and career, he was on a fast track to be, I think, not just a general, but probably a top-level general, and then go into politics or a diplomat. And this investigation that happened on him is basically, it led to a black mark on his career where he didn't get promoted above lieutenant colonel and probably was never going to, and probably realised that. But he revealed in the Leppo interview that his barony that he was given, the barony of Rakhine, I think it's called, that's a level above a knight. So he can't accept a knighthood as an American citizen, but I guess a barony goes even above that. So he's become like a member of the British aristocracy as a reward for his service. So what was his service that he did? We'll have a look into my other videos, particularly part 2 and 3 of the Shadow History series, and it goes right into some of this stuff. But basically, the launching of the internet, it came out of the Presidio, the 7th Psychological Operations Division. Now, one of the other interesting things that was dropped on the Leppo stream was from Dave Acton, actually 2 bombshell pieces of information that Prepper Kitty gave in the chat. One was that when he was in a helicopter mission in Nicaragua, where the helicopter crashed, and they actually were held hostage for some time. They managed to escape, and he was a radio operator. This was before the Iran-Contra. So Jason Goodman has accused him, because he did that, of being a drug dealer, which it's ridiculous. I mean, if you want to say that anyone who served in the military is involved in drug dealing just because the military is involved in drug dealing, well, I don't know, you're a moron. You don't deserve to have a large YouTube following and get donations from people, in my opinion. But anyway, Dave said that when he was down by this helicopter, he was rescued by remote viewing. And that's very interesting because they're quite into remote viewing over there on Leppo's channel, where you've got Frank Bacon and Leppo, they're doing streams about it. And Thomas has alleged, I don't know how much truth there is to it or not, but has alleged to have been involved in these military remote viewing projects. And it would have been great to see, rather than the softball questions, some real questions asked of Aquino, for example, about that, because Aquino has written about Project Stargate and the Men Who Stare at Goats and all of the military's investigations into that. They spent at least $20 million on it, and he thinks it's all a load of bullshit. He's written a paper on it. You can track that down. So I would have liked to hear him and Thomas having a discussion, and I don't know, maybe Frank Bacon did get into that. I tuned out when that guy came on. But the other thing that was interesting that came from Prepper Kitty was I asked him how early he had been on the internet. And he said it was 1985. And so basically, like 85 is when they were making the first decisions to take the internet and launch it onto the public. Up until then, it had been a weapon system developed by the Pentagon, by ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, which then became DARPA. So this is the Pentagon's DARPA weapon, the internet, and really developed by Stanford. I mean, there were many other contributors to it, but Stanford is the genesis of almost all of this technology, in my opinion. And the command and control center for the entire internet was here at the Presidio in the middle of the space in 1984. And so when they moved the internet from the military-only system to the system we have now, which was an academic and scientific system that then went to some large corporations and then was open to the public, that was called NSFNet. They also retained MilNet at the core of the internet. So, the way I think about the military internet is it's everything on the public internet plus all the military systems. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Don't assume that there's anything on the public internet, including the dark web, in my opinion. I don't think it's, there's encryption and things can be protected, but the capabilities of what the military has is usually 30 years ahead of what we're publicly told. So with the quantum computing and the power that they have now, just assume they're always watching everything, right? And not only are they watching everything, but they are pushing to have the dark, evil religions like Satanism, Setianism, whatever, to be respected and embraced and become an active part of military life, which I believe is the doctrine in the US military, at least the Army, or I believe all the armed forces, and also in at least the Navy in the UK. But so Dave was saying that on the internet in 1985, there was a lot of child porn, and the child porn was coming on the internet, coming out of the Department of the Army, and specifically out of the Department of the Army PSYOP projects. And so Aquino was basically running these PSYOP projects at the Presidio at the time that this happened. So that's like, a pretty interesting first-hand confirmation. And there was no questions about that asked of Aquino, right? And now, look, fair enough. Get him on the show, get him to talk about, share his wisdom. He probably doesn't want to talk, at the end of his life about this negative stuff. But that doesn't mean that our questions go unanswered. So there was one really good document here. I hope I can find that, and I'll maybe leave you guys with that and pick this up soon. Well, we could take a quick look at this one. The original handwritten police report. I think this is, you can go to Bibliotheca Pleiades, which is a great site to get that. But this is talking about when he was identified by one of the kids who had been molested. So there were definitely kids that were molested. One guy was prosecuted for it. Gary Hambright, a teacher, he died of AIDS before he could go to jail. There's no evidence that any of the kids had AIDS, but there is evidence that 5 of the kids had chlamydia. Now, Aquino fights against that pretty hard in his book, and it sort of came across as like, if you were building a legal defense as a trial, your lawyer would want to fight that one piece of evidence to get it, just cut out and dismissed from it so that it wouldn't be considered in the case. But when you read it in the book, you're thinking like, well, if this guy really was innocent of all of this, why is he fighting so hard to say that, it's bullshit that the kids had chlamydia? Like, why wouldn't he say, it's horrific that the kids had chlamydia, and oh my God, I can't believe it, right? So there's a couple of things like that are still definitely red flags for me. Look, I'm not going to read this out because it is sort of quite a bit graphic. But basically, the parents who was the chaplain at the Presidio, so he's there on the God-fearing Christian side. He's saying, or their kid was one of these kids that got molested. So a letter came out from the army saying, hey, we think some kids might have been molested by a teacher. And then the kid of the chaplain one day happens to see Aquino and his wife going, in and out of the military commissary, I think it was, on the Presidio, and he's got his distinctive eyebrows. Maybe he's wearing a satanic-looking collar or however he liked to go about. And the kid's like, oh, that's Mikey and Shamby, and that's who molested me. And so that led not to any criminal conviction or prosecution, even though there was multiple investigations, but it did lead to a $3 million lawsuit from that chaplain against Aquino. And so there's this broader context, I think, going in of the Christian right trying to fight against military going into the Presidio. That's one of the subtexts of what is going on, that in a way works in Aquino's defense. But the other subtext that's going on is that in those bunkers there, kids were molested. Child molesters were busted doing it. And, these children had chlamydia. How did they get chlamydia? And even the teacher, as he was walking out of court, he says, if it was me, it couldn't have been only me. Why am I the only one being looked at? So if it did go on, and it wasn't just here as well, there were 14 different military bases all around the world of different branches of the military that reported this type of thing going on. It happened at West Point, which is the US military academy where they train their most elite personnel. Timothy Leary, I think, went to West Point for maybe a year. He didn't make it through. But Rudy Giuliani was the prosecutor sent in to investigate the child abuse at West Point, and he went and said, I couldn't find any evidence of it, and it was all hushed up and covered up. But it actually, they did find some Marine there that had possession of child porn and was a bit crazy, I think. And then at the Presidio, they did find this teacher, but he was never successfully prosecuted. He could die before that happened. But there was a report, police officer called Sandy Gallant, and she was very involved in investigating Satanism in the military. And that's what I'm trying to find, is that there was an original report from her about the Temple of Set, but it was in 1981, so much longer before any of that happened. Maybe it's this one, Army Letter, Temple of Set. Yep, I think it's this one. Yeah, okay, so on 21st of July 1981, the undersigned was contacted by Officer Sandy Daly. So I believe that she later became Sandy Gallant. I think that she's the same person who became the chief investigator of satanic crimes, not just for SFPD, but as a result of this satanic panic kind of thing that was going on, she was able to go nationwide as, one of the top satanic police people in the world. The other one being probably Ted Gunderson, who was tied with Michael Aquino. Aquino's written some things debunking him. Ed Opperman says that Aquino and Gunderson were pretty close. Be aware of these activities of the Temple of Set, and Michael Aquino is the leader of the group. So 1981, that's going on. Now, let me just quickly show you, and then I've really got to end the stream abruptly and run. Constant Cumby's New Age Monitor. So I've been in touch with Constance. She's an attorney and researcher, and she wrote a book called The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, which is really about how the philosophies of the New Age movement actually came from the Nazis. And that's kind of a key puzzle piece in linking all of this stuff together. Aquino's a follower of the Nazis and studier of magic and hypnosis, and MK Ultra's doing magic and hypnosis and mind control. He's friends with Jefferson Starship and hanging out with the Grateful Dead. Aquino's mom was one of the founders of the KPFA in Berkeley and the Pacifica Foundation that backed that. And they are the main promoters of the Grateful Dead's music and show. And then you've got Bill Graham and all that stuff. Watch my special 50 Years of Flower Power, where we talked about that stuff. But this is an amazing magazine. In 1986 June is about the first time I've been able to trace that, word of this First Earth Battalion and Temple of Set were getting out to people in the public. And this is the absolute time that the internet was launched publicly, and this is the time that Burning Man was launched publicly as well, at the same time as this. And Burning Man was launched right next to the Presidio at Baker Beach, just as Anton LaVey launched the Church of Satan right next to the Presidio. So Jim Channon is beyond the scope of this stream. There'll be another stream to talk about him. Yeah, that's better. Okay, Michael Aquino. So, what have I got for time? Okay, yeah, I got 5 minutes on this. Okay, so here's Aquino. So he's been seconded to NATO in the 1980s when he's on the up and up on his career path. He's basically been groomed for United Nations or maybe Joint Chiefs of Staff or something like that. Absolute top level. Even when he was a Boy Scout, he got the Order of the Arrow, which is like a top level initiation of Boy Scouts, which is another Masonic organisation. And Aquino did say that both of his grandfathers were Masons. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So he said he uses European military tours to advantage for his cult as well as government business. And then in writing to his followers, and this is in, I think, the Cloven Hoof, the Church of Satan magazine, might be in a Temple of Set magazine, I'm not sure. But the reason for my silence during the past month is about to be explained. I've been out of country. During the first part of October, I participated in a series of tours of NATO installations in England, Belgium and Germany, ranging through the World Affairs Council. At the conclusion of the tours, I was able to undertake a long-awaited personal quest. So this is something that's been very important for him to do throughout his life, that he finally got to do because of his important, prestigious position as a NATO advisor. He wrote an article on Nazi occultism for the Cloven Hoof in April. Heinrich Himmler had appropriated a Westphalian castle, the Wavelsberg, and had modified it for ritual and black magic activities of the SS. The more I tried to obtain details concerning it, the more frustrated I became. Upon returning to the medieval museum room with the curator, I inquired whether I might be able to spend some time in the Hall of the Dead alone. To my surprise, he assented, provided that I sign in the log for the key. I did so, returned alone to the hall, locked myself in, and undertook what I shall henceforth refer to as the Wavelsberg or Wavelsberg working. It's to summon the powers of darkness at their most powerful locus. Okay, so this is his own writing, that he's gone to Himmler's Nazi chamber, that Himmler just said, I'm taking that castle over because I want to do magic in the underground Hall of the Dead chamber that you've got there. And Aquino has got access to it alone, and what he wants to do with that time, his own kind of meditation, I guess, summon the powers of darkness at their most powerful locus. So, Leppo makes fun of Truth Convoy for saying that show is the gates of hell, but this is like, pretty much is, dude. Like, I don't see what show on YouTube you could say is more close to it than someone who is like the most respected, top level PsyOps, career military guy for 40 years, who on his free time wants to go and do this shit, right? So I'll scroll through this, so if people want to come and read the rest of it, they can freeze on the screens and have a look about what he's doing and the nature of the thing, and psychotronic research. And that's what all this is about. And one of the things that Aquino talks about is proxemics. And proxemics is the idea of creating the environment of how you are going to deliver a message to someone. And the more you can get closer into that person, the more receptive they're going to be for the message they're delivering. And so that's why you see with these gang stalkers all this like getting to know you, sending you personal messages, including in you in their discussions and their chats. They're trying to recruit you into this so they can figure out what are the emotional buttons that they can press that will trigger you, and then once they know that, they're able to manipulate you and drive you in the directions they want. And who's they? Well, increasingly it's becoming artificial intelligence. It's not, I don't think, the one guy like Michael Aquino sitting at the end of, behind the curtain in his wizard robes, pulling all of the evil strings in the internet, and nor do I think that Thomas is that guy either. But I think that there are hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people on the internet who are trolls and who are disinformationists and who are getting paid money or super chats or lemons or whatever it is, but to lead people astray and to dumb people down and to make them receptive to the psyops, to the kind of thing that we've seen from Jeffrey Epstein, where the media is like, oh well, yeah, it's just a suicide. What are you going to do? Like, really? Does anybody believe that? And so, I don't know. I got a lot more I'd like to say about this. I guess that's the thing about this live streaming. I'll just go on when I got a chance, and I'll share my thoughts. And yeah, hopefully for future streams, I'll get the sound working on the clips. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.